Rito Village might not be a castle per se, but dear Hylia if it isn't one of the best defended locations in Hyrule. Today we'll be going over what makes the Rito Village so great as a fortress, its weaknesses, and an honest to Hylia possible battle scenario. That's quite an undertaking though, so I've enlisted help from a friend. A friendly neighborhood pirate. Yeah!
Darn right I am. My name is the Bread Pirate, and I'm gonna be helping Draken out by showing you guys what is wrong with the Rito Village.
If you find this subject matter interesting, subscribe to the channel. It will help to keep our research effort going. So, grab your cup of chocolate or other beverage of your choice, get comfy, and let us begin. Rito Village stands out for not having any fortifications, like none at all, nada. In almost every other case, it would make the village an easy target, but Rito Village has something that most other towns lack. An amazing location. Frankly, building walls around Rito Village, if anything, would be wasteful. Traditional defenses are not needed when the inhabitants are capable of flight and live in a place which plays into that ability so gosh darn well. It's the cliff. I'm talking about the cliff. The cliff is everything. As I've already touched on in a past video of mine, Rito Village is very peculiar because of its structure. It is attached, precariously hanging on a single tall spire, surrounded by a deep, and I mean deep, pit on all sides. Not a problem for people who can fly, but for everyone else? 4 wooden bridges connecting the shore with the spires are the only way into the village. And, as we've now seen, once even one of those bridges is out, everyone on the other side will be stranded until repairs can be made. And breaking them is easy! The upheaval has demonstrated as much. If an enemy force came knocking at Rito's door, they'd only need to drop something heavy enough to break the bridge once again. Their opponent would be left with no other way of crossing and become stranded on the shore. Or Rito could also burn the bridge by firing flaming arrows. Works just as well, I reckon. Speaking of arrows, the village is built for easy landings and takeoffs, which would greatly aid the Rito in the defense effort. The archers could zip around between the battlefield and the village, refilling their quivers as needed. Meanwhile, the attackers would be left on the lake shore, which offers very little cover. There are trees of course, but those don't do much against elemental or bomb arrows. Burrowing small makeshift bunkers in the ground would help to remedy that problem, if the shore wasn't so rocky, that is. As it stands, creating such fortifications is unfeasible. This position is already great for the Rito, but it is made even greater by everything else about village's location. Crucially, Rito Village is surrounded by mountains. If we take a quick look at the map, we have the Hybra Range, spanning from the north to northeast, Kucho Mountain, blocking access from the south, and a giant chasm, no, not that kind, preventing approach from the west. These are all nigh impossible barriers for an army. Instead, a marching force would have to take one of only 3 passages into the valley. They could approach from the east, which looks great on paper, as it has an actual road and no narrow choke points along the way. The only problem? It is an extremely roundabout way of getting there from central Hyrule. An invasion would likely originate in Hyrule Castle, and, well, thanks to Tanagar Canyon, this particular road is just shy of twice as long as the alternatives. And if that wasn't enough, it leads through a tundra. This means the enemy would be forced to undertake an elongated march in harsh conditions, with the majority of its length along the canyon. It would allow the Rito to perform hit-and-run attacks, trapping the enemy between their bows and a deadly fall. Whenever possible, Rito would also try to force supplies over the edge, making even reaching the village an absolute nightmare. Believe it or not, the other 2 possible routes are even worse. Both of them lead through several choke points. They start at the Banfa Great Bridge, required to pass Tanagar Canyon without walking around it again, Then the road leads between the ancient columns and Piper Ridge. That passage wouldn't be all that narrow if not for the 3 giant rocks, right in the middle of it. At the best of times, they are obstructing the road. At worst, they provide landing spots and cover for Rito keen on interrupting the advance. After passing through that lovely area, the 2 paths split. By following the road, monsters will be led through 3 other prime ambush spots. Off-roading it, on the other hand, also leads through prime ambush spots, but only 2 this time. And the off-road route is shorter in general, so that's a plus. While the roads are usually preferred when leading an army, in this case, well, let's take a closer look. By following the road, monsters will enter the valley between Nero Hill and Passer Ridge. It doesn't look all that bad, but what it precedes is Calamity Bridge, an extremely precarious and narrow passage. It only allows for single-file crossing and is required to continue the approach. There isn't enough wood nearby to make the bridge wider, so the march would slow down to a crawl. That, in turn, will leave monsters like sitting ducks, an easy target for Rito's aerial assaults. And then, even after the army passes to the other side, it will be immediately met with an unnamed canyon. It is only a bit wider than the bridge, again leaving the monsters wide open to attacks by avian archers. Yes, the path of the road is better indeed, not by a whole lot though. The initial stretch is fine. The terrain is rather flat, it's nice, wide and open. That will change though as the marching force approaches Kucho Mountain. The only way to bypass it leads straight through a narrow passage along the nameless chasm. Advancing through this stretch will constrain the army just as well as the Nero Hill choke point would. From there, the monsters would have to cross Passer Hill Canyon. There, the path becomes even more dreadfully narrow. While that canyon is pretty short, it does something else. Much like the Calamity Bridge, it will slow down the progression of the army. Monsters will be kept by the chasm for much longer, left wide open for attacks. All 3 of these options are awful in their own unique ways, and they have been proven to work in favor of the Rito. The last remaining guardians are a testament to old battles well fought. Their husks mark the front lines, the borders which the scourge has reached. None have made it across Tabanfa. They were all stopped in the valley past the Tabanfa Great Bridge and in the snowy peaks of Hibra. Only the 2 Skywatchers and a lone stalker remained, patrolling their respective territories. Living relics of the invasion, halted just in time. It seems odd then that the Rito allowed various monsters to take hold on their territory. They can be found around the village, in small groups in the mountains and in the canyon past the Calamity Bridge. But pretty much none of them are flying monsters, are they? Then perhaps Rito do not see the need to bother. Monsters are a nuisance to travelers, but definitely not to the Rito themselves. These bokoblins couldn't cross to the Rito village even if they tried. They'd be stopped immediately. Instead, Rito chose to fend off actual threats, the Guardians, and kept them away from the village.
But as great as all of this stuff seems, the village has left itself vulnerable in many ways. For starters, take a look at the shape of the central spire that the entire town is resting on, and take a look at how thin it gets, especially right around where the village is. Undoubtedly, there are years of erosion and maybe architecture that are wearing down on this spire and making it thinner and thinner and thinner until it'll get to the point that it'll completely topple over and get destroyed. Honestly, I think it's a miracle that it's lasted this long. I mean, look how top heavy that is. Like, that's ridiculous. What kind of stone is this made of? I'm not a geologist, I have no idea. But whatever stone this is, I doubt it could last much longer. But even if you trust the structural stability of the rocks that this village is built on, one thing that is especially unnerving is the chains that a lot of these buildings are hanging on. They are not complete chains, but are instead more like C shapes. that are strung together, probably to make it easier for construction and to lower building costs. But this makes it way less safe. There is only a tiny piece of metal that is holding up the entire building here, instead of 2 pieces of metal for each link that would be stringing in an O shape instead of a C shape. If one of these links gets detached, boom, that house is gone. Now thankfully, some of these houses are being rested on rocks, which gives them a bit more structural stability. So it's not entirely resting on the chain, there's a little bit something there, but not every house has this benefit. And if that tiny bridge there comes detached, then have fun in your new tire swing, because you're gonna be swaying all over the place. And let's not forget that all of these houses are extremely flammable. And in a world where you can attach a rock to a stick and it instantly becomes a wand that shoots fireballs, I think that we have a problem on our hands. Especially because it's really easy to get a hold of fire arrows, and lots of enemies in the Hebra region use fire arrows. Who am I looking at? Oh, hello, Lysa. You're in danger. Also, fun fact, there are 2 really big problems with the geography of Rito Village. Number 1 is that Rito Village has a gloom chasm underneath it. And this ain't any old chasm. This chasm is a Yiga stronghold and is the location where the Yiga are developing their super weapon. And as you can imagine, having a village located directly above a super weapon is not really great for safety. And the second thing that sucks about this location is that it's high risk and high reward. Sure, you get a ton of great defense from this moat, but Rito are, from what I can tell, not renowned for their swimming abilities. So if you get injured as a Rito while flying above this chasm and you fall into it, well gosh, I don't think you're making it out of this. I think you're stuck down here till you drown. So it is absolutely not all sunshine and flowers in Rito Village.
Rito's ability to fly plays an important role when it comes to resources too. Or, more accurately, it is the sole reason why Rito Village cannot be besieged. In layman's terms, a siege means cutting off a castle from the rest of the world. Attackers win if they can hold that line for longer than the castle's supplies can last. And therein lies the problem. Because Rito can fly, and most monsters can't, it is impossible to prevent the village from gathering supplies. The location of the village plays a vital role here. The surrounding area is rich in wildlife Rito can hunt. It offers enough wood for repairs, fletching of arrows and bow making. And what's even more important, Hebra offers 3 large lakes Rito can gather water supplies from. What? Look, at a glance, it does seem like water is the least of Rito's concerns when under attack. They have ready access to an entire lake right under their village, do they not? Well, there are 2 crucial problems with using Lake Totori for water while under siege. First, that would require Rito to fly below the shoreline, and that's a problem. It would expose them to being shot by monsters positioned above. Obviously, that is not ideal. Second, that water will not be good to drink for long. It will cease being so when first bodies fall over the edge, while trying to gather water, for instance. So it really is fortunate that Rito won't need to fly far to compensate for those issues. The village is also situated reasonably close to 2 different stables. Since Rito can fly above the enemy lines, it will be totally feasible to establish an emergency supply chain with the Hylians. That way, Rito will be able to get their feathers on everything they can't hunt or gather by themselves, like metal weapons, for instance. Not that the Rito like using swords anyways. Arrow tips though. While Rito are great bowmakers and fletchers, they don't really make for good smiths. They can, of course, make arrows without metal tips, with the use of rocks or sharpened wood instead. Still, having ready-made metal arrowheads is definitely preferred. Supplies from the stables will also be of great help when it comes to food. As mentioned before, Rito can hunt to sustain themselves. However, if they fail to find enough prey, they can always fall back on deliveries from the stables. You can't starve the Rito. If one is to take their village, it has to be done by storm.
Now, up to this point, we've been mostly studying the architecture and the terrain of the Rito, but battles aren't won by mountains and valleys, they're won by the soldiers who fight in them. If a battle broke out between the Rito and the surrounding monsters in Hyrule, the armies themselves would play just as big a role as the battlefield does. So let's take a look at the pros and cons of each military, that being the Rito and the monsters respectively. On one hand, we have the Rito, who, as you probably well know, can fly, or at least glide. They also have a healthy supply of arrows and bows, which they actively make, and they have an affinity for bombs and fire arrows. This makes them very devastating to any incoming army that would even try to step on their village, because, I mean, heck, I don't want to be shot from a distance with fire arrows and bomb arrows, do you? Now, let's briefly go over the population of the Rito. Somewhere in the range of 25 to 30% of the Rito population consists of adult males who are capable of military service. The rest of the population is made up of females, children, and elderly, who mostly tend themselves with collecting supplies, food, and crafting arrows. That being said, even though the females seem to be the one creating arrows, the males are the ones who are mostly making the weapons. They are the actual blacksmiths, making bows, swords, and spears. On the subject of Rito weaponry, it's important to note that they actually put holes in the middle of their swords and spears to make them lighter for carrying in the air. Surprisingly, despite having a huge chunk of the sword missing, this doesn't seem to impact the performance of the weapons in terms of durability or damage output. But either way, it doesn't really make too much of a difference because Rito hate using these. They prefer using bows because, you know, aerial advantage. That's their whole thing. The Rito have also developed their own shields, although they're kind of small, and I don't really know what their purpose is, because I don't even know how the Rito would hold on to this with their strangely shaped arms. I am assuming this is more like a trinket for humans, or maybe they try and use their feet to hold this while they're in the air as a form of protection while they are flying, so underneath them will be safe, but I don't really know. The other thing to mention is that according to Creating a Champion and in-game dialogue, the Rito have terrible night vision. It says it's never explained quite how bad it is, but we can assume that it's bad enough that it would provide a strategic disadvantage if they were in a fight in the middle of the night. And that is basically the Rito in a nutshell. So if I'm a Rito fighter, there are a few things I would want to keep in mind when I'm going into war. Number one, keep an eye on the ridges around your territory. Keep an eye on the hills everywhere, because you have the flight advantage. Use it to just see everything around you. You have a wonderful high vantage point and you can fly. Use your scouting capabilities to catch any threat that comes to you before it is too late. Number two, don't worry about Arakudas and keys. Most flying enemies are going to be absolutely no problem to you. Number three, if enemy forces come to your shore trying to besiege you, just shrug. Like, that's no threat to you whatsoever, because you can fly right over them to get supplies, food, water, anything you need. And number four is that even if you do run out of things like arrows and bomb arrows, you can just start dropping rocks, sticks, even your metal weapons on top of enemies to try and do damage to them, because you are capable of carrying a reasonable amount of stuff. You've carried Link before, gosh darn it. Rito can carry a lot, so use that to your advantage to drop crazy things on your enemies like B-2 bombers in World War II or something. So those are all of Bread's tips for combat if you are a Rito. But with that, let's take a look at the monsters to see if they have any strengths or weaknesses that could be used against the Rito. Okay, so in my medical opinion, the best way of analyzing the monsters is actually by straight up looking at how many there are and what types there are in the surrounding area, using this little thing known as the interactive map. For instance, if we want to see the amount of Botws in the surrounding area, we need to only simply click this button, and now we have access to all of their locations on the map. And as we can see, there are quite a lot of them in the Hyrule region that can be called up for military service. However, the ones that are actually a direct threat to the village at this moment are very few. There are some right here, a little cluster right there. Maybe these guys would be a problem. And then there's also a few on the hill here over the pass that leads into town. So that might be a severe threat if they get wise and start dropping rocks down on unsuspecting travelers. But at the moment, it seems like they are not too interested in that. So maybe the lucky Clover Gazette is safe for now. But that's just the Botws. We gotta actually look at all the others. So let's add Moblins, of which there are very few in the Hyrule region, actually. We can see here, if I enable them, there's one right there, and one right there. Wow, that's it. Okay, so I guess Moblins aren't gonna be a threat. Next are the Lizzles. There are quite a few of them, most of them ice-breathing, so that is somewhat of a threat. There also are 2 of them in the canyon pass right here, probably trying to sneak up on unsuspecting travelers, and Nero Hill has a few of them as well. So there are definitely some Lizzles that could be called up for military service, maybe not as big a threat as the Botws though. And then there are some Arrokudas in the area, these green dots. They're all kind of far away, but since they are flying animals, if Ganon wanted to, he could use his telepathic powers to let the Arrokudas know to fly to the battle. So we'll assume that there are a few Arrokudas that can pose a serious threat to the Rito. And now let's take a look at the Ice Kings, and by that I mean the Ice Wizards. There are a number of Ice Wizards in the surrounding area. There's one here, there's a Wizrobe right there, and then there's also an electric Wizrobe right here. I don't think the one in the valley here, or this ravine, is too big of a deal, though he's kind of stuck there. The rest of these guys, though, they can float over to the Rito Village, which means that they pose an actual threat, unlike the other enemies we just mentioned. And not only that, but they have area of effect attacks that could potentially lead to problems for the village if the Rito got too close to them. So the Wizrobes, they pose more of a threat than anybody else we've seen thus far. The Arrokudas, I don't think they're a big deal. They die in one hit. They can fly, but that's basically it. How about the Taluses? Are there any here? Yes, the answer is there are. There's one there. That's a Battle Talus. There's a Stone Talus here. A Battle Talus right there. Battle Talus meaning that they carry Bokos on their back. And there is a Frost Talus right here. Taluses potentially pose a threat. If they can get close enough to the village, then they can lob rocks at it. I don't actually know if that's viable though, because the Taluses are big, hunking, slow tanks, essentially. So getting them to the Rito Village would pose a difficulty, and then also harnessing their power for siege warfare would be fairly difficult, because they seem kind of mindless, but if they can get their act together, then maybe they could be used for a battle. That remains to be seen. As for Lynels, there are only 2 of them to worry about. There is a blue-maned Lynel right here, and a normal Lynel right here, although this one can scale up as the game is going on. So maybe it'll be more dangerous if we give it enough time. He's a little toddler right now, but neither of these Lynels would be too big of a threat as long as the Rito kept them at a fair distance away from the village, because this is quite the gap for a Lynel to jump over or shoot over, and I don't think that it's reasonable to expect a Lynel to be able to directly attack the Rito Village. I really don't think it would happen. Next up, we're looking at the Horriblins. There are a few. They are very sparse, and I don't think they like coming out of their caves, so they're probably not an issue, but it's worth mentioning them. And then last, but certainly not least, we have to take a look at the Gleeoks, because the Gleeoks, unlike all of these other monsters, pose a real severe threat to the Rito, especially this frost one right here, this frost one here, the fire-breathing one to the south, which if he got any wise ideas, he could easily burn down the village, and of course, the King Gleeok, which exists in the sky, very nearby, especially because it's a flying creature and it could just swoop down and turn Rito Village into lunch if it wanted to. I mean, granted, it has to go through the Rito military first, but I don't know, that's gonna be a closer conflict. I'm gonna let Draken figure out that one if it's possible for the Rito to win or not. But either way, that is the monster army in a nutshell. So let's say that you're a low-down, no-good son of a monster and you wanna invade Rito Village. What tips do I have for you? Number 1 is that if you're a common soldier, your objective is just to freaking survive, man. I mean, it's crazy out there, especially with the fact that you're gonna be rained down on by arrows and bombs. And then also, if you fall into the ravine during the siege, that's just water. That is a watery death. The only monsters that can effectively do this siege are the dragons and the Wizrobes. Everybody else is just support. You're there to cheer on your monster friends as they go into battle and likely die in the process. That's what you exist for. You are cannon fodder. You are a distraction. Just try and distract them as much as possible. Yeah, let's go with that. Go with distraction mode. That's a good one. Number 2, I'm gonna reiterate this, even though we said it earlier, don't bother with a traditional siege. Look at the aim on this guy. He can't even hit me. He's not even gonna hit me, watch this. Okay, he hit me that time. But the monster aim is not good enough to hit all the way from here into the Rito Village. You're not gonna be able to do that. Don't bother with a siege. Just hide in your caves, do a little attack, and then go back to your caves and call it a day. And number 3, and I hope this one is obvious, make sure you are attacking at night. Hey, wow, buddy, I'm giving you some tips here. You ought to be listening. Attacking during the daytime is suicide. The Rito can see you from a mile away, and you don't really even have a way of getting over there, so I don't even know how you would manage to try and attack them. But if you do find a way of doing it, do it during the nighttime. Give yourself a break, okay? Monsters thrive during the nighttime, so use that to your advantage. But with all that said and done, I think that's everything I have to say about the Rito and the monsters in this conflict. Back to you, Draken.
Having that said, what would a battle actually look like? Oh yes, time for the fun part of the video. There are 2 possible scenarios really. The scouts notice monsters leaving their camps and gathering into larger groups, ready to cross into the valley. They also pick up on weird behavior of the 3 Gleeoks nesting dangerously close to the village. Reaction is immediate. Teba orders the Gazette staff to be brought inside the village and the bridges cut. Then, Rito warriors take up their bows and leave. They split into 3 groups, led by Teba, Harf, and Tulin. Each is tasked with bringing down one of the 3-headed monstrosities. It is a cold morning. First rays of the sun gently kiss the ancient ruins. It would be peaceful, serene even, if not for a dark silhouette. The mighty Gleeok, dark like a stain on a painting, is thrashing about impatiently. The flames on its head burn bright and hot, as if ready to challenge the sun itself. The Gleeok's roar shatters the silence of the morning. Rito warriors appeared as if from nowhere, blinding sun behind their backs. With 3 well-aimed ice arrows, they downed the behemoth. As it lies, stunned and surprised, they shower it with a rain of arrows. Some bounce off of the thick hide, most sink deep into the back of the monster, black scales now marked with streaks of red. Others shred the wings, but not enough. Finally, Gleeok shakes off the shock. It roars, now in anger. Gusts of magical wind surround it, hot as the desert air. The blast knocks some of the Rito off balance. Others manage to escape in time. Gleeok beats its wings and raises up into the air, its eyes now trained on the small group of warriors. How dare they! The heads bend back and spit rays of condensed flame towards the blinding light of the sun. They catch one warrior. He screams as the feather light on fire and falls, leaving only a trail of smoke behind him. Then one more fails to make his escape. The rest scatter. They dodge and weave in between flames with incredible agility. Despite this, the sheer heat of Gleeok's fire is enough to blacken the tips of Rito's feathers. Still, they persevere. Another volley is shot, now much more hectic, less precise. At first, only one arrow finds its mark, taking out one of the heads. With the heat lessened, the other 2 are soon to follow. Gleeok's body falls limp and comes crashing down. Something cracks as it hits the ground, clouds of dust rising around it. Rito showers it with arrows again. It tries to get up, blast the warriors away with another gust of wind, but this time Rito are prepared. Another volley of ice arrows flies, and Gleeok falls back on the ground before it even had the chance to fly. A pained roar that shatters the earth marks the end of the battle. The dragon hatefully screams one last time, cursing the Rito as the final breath escapes it. Then it falls limp, its fire put out. Between the 3 squads, Rito lost 5 fine warriors this day. That sacrifice was well worth it, however. Without the backing of the Gleeoks, the monster army was left at the mercy of remaining Rito warriors. The rest of the threats, the Wizrobes and Arokudas, were dealt with before the enemy forces even set foot on Lake Totori's shore. The others got stuck in front of the cut bridge, unable to proceed further. They began cutting trees in an attempt to make their own. That plan was quickly foiled, however, by relentless barrages of Rito arrows. Eventually, monsters had no choice but to scatter into surrounding mountains, thus ending the invasion.
Well, Draken, that's nice, but isn't that kind of wishful thinking? Personally, I think that it's best to prepare for the worst. So, what would happen if the monsters attacked first, instead of the Rito attacking first? Here are some of the ways that it could go. Option number 1. The monster army stalks in the dead of night, getting as close to the village as they can by approaching from the west, where there are fewer Rito warriors to spot them. Then, with the use of Aerokudas, the monsters would ferry their highest-ranking Bokos and Lizzles across the ravine and into the Rito Village. At the same time, icy Wizrobes would tiptoe towards the village and form a protective blizzard around the Aerokuda to obscure where they are located and to make it harder for arrows to hit them. Eventually, the Rito would notice this invasion and sound the alarm, snapping the bridge between the mainland and the spire just to be safe, and then sending all their best warriors to shoot down the incoming fleet. However, it wouldn't be enough, as some of the monsters would arrive on the central spire and start raiding houses. This would lead to a back-and-forth skirmish between the monsters and the Rito on the spire, fighting up and down the stairs. But ultimately, the Rito would come out on top, since they can easily knock most monsters off the spire, but the monsters cannot knock the Rito off the spire. And as for the Wizrobes, well, Rito archers can shoot further than Wizrobes can shoot ice. So by firing a mass amount of arrows at the Wizrobes, eventually the Ritos would win. As for the damage caused by the battle, a number of warriors and civilians would undoubtedly be injured, and the Rito would start posting guards on the west side of the village to look out for future attacks. But all in all, the damage from the attack would be superficial, since no real damage would be done to the buildings themselves. Option number 2 is this. The King Gliok, the Fire Gliok, and the Ice Gliok have a meeting and decide that they could really go for some chicken. So they fly over to the Rito Village in the dead of the night, and without warning start ripping open buildings, lighting everything on fire, and eating tons of Rito! Now, according to the script that Draken gave me, this is supposed to be the part where the Rito warriors come up with a desperate last stand and barely manage to slay the dragon. Oh, I hate to break it to you guys. There is no way that's happening. The greatest warrior the Rito tribe ever produced, the mighty Rivali, was easily killed by Windblight Ganon because the fight took place at night when his vision was impaired. Windblight Ganon, at its worst, has 2,000 hit points. Do you want me to put that into perspective for you? Do you want to know how much health a Gliok has? Huh? Do you? It's 8,000. And there's 3 of them. There is no last stand, no valiant battle. There is only Kentucky Fried Chicken. If the battle took place during the daytime, then maybe they'd have a fighting chance, but nighttime, nah. The only saving grace in this situation, this is the silver lining, is that some of the Rito would probably escape the dragon onslaught, enabling them to start a new society from scratch elsewhere. But as for the old village, it would be transformed into a dragon spire, where only foolhardy travelers would dare to set foot. In other words, it would be exactly like Smaug's lair from The Hobbit. But yeah, as long as 3 dragons don't simultaneously attack the village, the Rito are probably fine. Common armies stand absolutely no chance against them.
So, in summary, Rito Village is an amazing defensive location, although it has its fair share of flaws. Though to be fair, when the village was built, it didn't need to worry about dragons spitting flames hot as 1,000 suns. It is critical for the Rito to recognize those threats and deal with them accordingly. If they manage to do that, the village may never be conquered. I'd like to say a huge thank you to the Bread Pirate for joining me in this analysis. It was a lot of fun to make.
Hey, the pleasure was all mine. I had a ton of fun analyzing the Rito Village today.
If you'd like to see more in-depth defense breakdowns, head over to Brett's channel, where we analyzed Zora's domain and the precarious situation it found itself in. But before you go, you can now support the channel via YouTube memberships or Patreon, whichever one you prefer. Look, I made a poll on this and opinions were split, okay? You can join by either following the link in the description to my Patreon page, or you can click the join button right under this very video. Either way, you will have my gratitude for your support. And speaking of, huge thank you to my draconic sages, Von Bob and Jardine, for supporting the channel. And that's it for today. Thank you for listening, and good night.